Jesus of Nazareth, his sense of history, morality, and culture. Those who are interested are most welcome. In this video, I deal with an episode recorded in the 8th chapter of John's Gospel, verses 1 to 11, which has been interpreted in a variety of ways. But I feel that there is still something more about this episode that we need to consider. And I also intend the analysis that I propose to undertake in this video as an illustration of the wider and larger nuances in the spiritual vision of Jesus Christ and his intervention, the various aspects of the human condition upon earth. So, those who are interested in going beyond conventional piety, which I don't propose to deride or devalue, but those who are interested in looking a little beyond the remit or reach of conventional piety could find the contents of this video rather interesting. Now, very quickly, what is this episode? A woman, presumably taken in adultery, is presented to Jesus Christ by the very people who are out to stone her to death as per the prescriptions in the Jewish religious law, and asked to judge her. Jesus is asked to judge her, though she had already been judged and found guilty. That's why they're taking her out to be stoned to death. So what should we do with her? After all, you teach a new way. You're not like the conventional priestly class. You have always something new to say, something very different to the established traditions. So what is it that you want to say? Or how would you deal with an episode like this? Here is a woman who has been taken in adultery. Her crime or her offense is well established. There is no shadow of doubt left on it. As per our law, she deserves to be stoned to death. Now, what about you? Now, you judge her. So, this is a situation. And we know how Jesus deals with the situation. It's an extraordinary, it shows an extraordinary degree of presence of mind, which doesn't come just like that. It comes out of very profound understanding and deep-rooted convictions and exemplary clarity. And Jesus says, all right, you have found her guilty, so she deserves to be punished. No problem. But let he who has not sinned cast the first stone, and thereafter others can follow. The stones fall from the hands of everyone, one after the other. And ultimately, Jesus is left alone with the woman. In the meanwhile, Jesus is sitting on the ground and writing on the ground with his finger. And then after everybody goes, Jesus asks the woman, has no one condemned you? She says, no, no one. Jesus says, I also do not condemn you. Then comes the final exhortation. Go, sin no more. Go, sin no more. Now, this is the episode. How are we to understand it? Now, because I have been largely or primarily a student of literature, my training is in the art of understanding, interpreting symbols. So I look at major events in terms of the symbolism of those events. Secondly, I also have bothered to cultivate a sense of history, particularly the history of the way humankind has evolved over the millennia. So I combine a variety of insights in offering this interpretation because of my conviction that ultimately everything coheres together in the understanding of eternal and unchanging truths. The wider the perspective that you adopt, the greater the extent of insights and information that you bring to bear on interpreting an event, the larger or the higher is the possibility that you are closer to the truth. So now let's try and unpack this very interesting, intriguing, and symbolic event. I read the significance of this event in terms of the three stages through which this episode progresses. They're very easy to recognize. First is the stage of the stone. Second is the stage of the written word. Third is the stage of the spoken word, the liberating word. Very easy to remember: the stone, the written word, the spoken word. Now, how does this pattern apply to this episode? Or how does the episode unveil this pattern? I am not discovering a pattern independently of the episode and imposing it on it. Rather, I am reading the pattern of the episode, which holds the meaning, or which holds the key to the meaning of the episode. Now, as regards the men who are out to stone her to death, they are armed with stones. And we know that humankind passed through the Stone Age. Now, the hallmark of that stage was the exclusive reliance on violence. And it is common knowledge that when a society or a culture or a people group is dominated by their faith in violence, their style of operation and their mode of understanding would be unilateral. Violence always operates in a unilateral manner. For example, in the international context today, Donald Trump, because he is the president of the United States, which is the number one military as well as economic power in the world, can decide and act unilaterally. Whereas a smaller country will have to leave a margin for reciprocity. If I take this step, then there will be consequences. Or as Jesus said, treat others that you would like to be treated. But if you're the superpower, then you would like, and you think you can, you could be quite wrong about it, but you think you can take everybody on your terms. So during that particular phase of the evolution of humankind, which is dominated by the exclusive faith in the use of force, as symbolized by stone, unilateralism prevailed. Now, the woman was tried, found guilty, but we can only make an informed guess as to what kind of trial would have happened. Her part of the story obviously was not heard. She was caught and summarily condemned and condemned to death. And the full range of facts, which alone contains the truth of the matter, was not considered. And what Jesus does actually is to expose the very limited and unilateral nature of the way in which this episode or this particular problem has been handled by the religious authorities, the moral police of the times. That's why he says, he who has not sinned. And many commentators say that Jesus meant to say, those who have not sinned, or he who has not sinned with her. So Jesus is saying, look, the society as a whole is responsible for reducing this woman to this pathetic, degraded state. And then you take out your moral indignation on her, and you want to punish her, not necessarily because you want to improve the moral fiber of your society. You want to punish her because you want to destroy the evidence against you. Because this woman, so long as she lives, is a living evidence for your own moral depravity, which is a little too unnerving and disquieting for you to live with. So now that she has been discovered as having committed this offense, from which all of you, the menfolk in the society, derived a large amount of consolation and benefit. Now that she has been discovered in the act, she becomes the evidence against you, and therefore it is to your interest, understood unilaterally, that she is stoned to death and the evidence is destroyed. Much like in the Indian context, rapists wanting to kill the victims of their rape, because if the woman survives, she becomes a compelling witness against them. So, by way of destroying evidence, the victim is also eliminated. So, this is what is symbolized by the stone. The stone held by men in their hands represents a whole attitude to life, which is devoid of reciprocity or mutuality, or the equivalence of law, the idea that all must be equal in the eye of the law. Uh, Instead, the society is weighted heavily in favor of men, and in such a society, women will both be exploited and victimized. She must render services to men at the same time. She must also allow herself to be killed, even if she doesn't allow herself, but she will be killed, again for the interest of and for the convenience of men. So, this gross injustice characterizes this phase in the evolution of humankind, the moral stone age, as it were. And then Jesus counterpoints this with the next phase, which is the phase of the written word. That's why he sits down and writes on the ground. Now, many speculations have been undertaken as to what Jesus was writing or what Jesus would have been writing at that time. And many people suggest that Jesus was writing on the ground the specific details of the sins committed by these very men who are out to stone her to death. I'm not particularly convinced about that interpretation, for the simple reason that that interpretation does not square up with the character of Jesus. You find never once in the public ministry of Jesus Christ Jesus taking any interest in exposing anyone individually. He, of course, denounces the priestly class as a group, as a professional group, and that too because of the enormous harm priestcraft does to human beings by serving as a major hindrance to the spiritual evolution and liberation of humankind. Other than that, Jesus deals with every individual most compassionately. So I cannot endorse the interpretation that Jesus was writing the specifics of the moral depravity of the men in that group. Very likely he was aware of all details, but I don't think that was what he was writing. He was simply writing. It doesn't matter what he was writing. He was writing. He was writing because it was necessary to counterpoint stone with word. Now, we all know that word or capacity to express oneself in speaking and writing, or the age of literature, if you like, signifies the emergence of culture. So, from the Stone Age to the age of culture. Now, we all know, for that matter, the very significant role that printed books play in the evolution and sustenance of a religious tradition. Christians are known as the people of the book, but for the Bible, Christianity would have been in an entirely different state altogether. Greek gods have been largely created by Homer through his epics. The same is true of India, Ramayana, Mahabharata. So, literature, the emergence of literature, both religious literature and secular literature. In other words, the emergence of the secular word, language, written, spoken, the ability to communicate, the ability to share ideas, insights, concerns, information, etc., which reinforces the social instinct of human beings and strengthens human bondedness, human kinship, if you like, the sense of belonging together, uh, represents a very significant phase in the development of the human person as well as human culture. So, when Jesus sees these men armed with stone out to eliminate the evidence of their own moral depravity, acting unilaterally as cavemen did millennia ago, though many centuries, many ages have passed since then, in terms of the religious instinct, human beings are stuck in the Stone Age segment or Stone Age phase of human evolution. Um, so Jesus is marking, as it were, indicating, as it were, the next stage, reminding these people of the fact that humankind has outlasted and surpassed, outgrown the Stone Age. And we are now firmly into the age of civilization, characterized mainly by the word, the written word, and the art of writing, the art of communication, the art of examining evidence, the art of argumentation, the art of the idea that human beings must be given a chance to defend themselves, etc., etc. All that goes with the idea of civilization. So, it is from that context, the significant aspect of this age of civilization is, as I said, the idea that all should be treated equal in the eye of the law. And that is what Jesus is doing there. While up to the time Jesus came into the picture, this particular episode was managed in a purely unilateral manner, denying the woman the opportunity to defend herself, the society acting against her unilaterally, inflicting upon her the punishment of the capital punishment of death by stoning, in spite of the fact that even a school child should know that it's impossible to commit adultery all by oneself. And therefore, if she is caught in the act of adultery, there should be at least one man, very likely more than one man, many men, who have been co-actors with her in this drama of moral depravity. But all that is completely eclipsed, all that is occluded, kept out of sight. Only the woman is caught and punished. Not a word is said about the men who committed the sin with her. So that is the unilateralism I'm talking about, which is part of a very crude stage of human evolution. But from that, when we come into the phase of human civilization, the central idea here is the idea of justice, secular justice, by which all people should be treated alike in the eye of the law. Therefore, the two sides of the equation must be kept in mind, must be kept in view. So this side of the equation is a woman who's caught as the offender, but there is the other side of the equation, which would comprise many men who did the immoral act with her. But because in the domain of religion, everything is dealt with unilaterally, always that section of the society which wields power, in this case men, will be treated with utmost protectionism, and the victim therefore will be treated with redoubled vindictiveness. It is this hypocrisy that Jesus exposes in his own very characteristic, creative manner by saying, "He who has not committed any sin, may cast the first stone." Obviously, he is saying this to the men. There's not a single woman in the group. So he's saying, look, you need to consider the other side of the equation. And that's that's a hallmark of the age of civilization, rule of law, the equality of all in the eye of the law. And symbolically and dramatically, the idea is conveyed that even the fundamental requirement of the civilized existence, namely that all must be treated equal in the eye of the law, is not acceptable or even bearable as far as the men are concerned. They are used to acting unilaterally, as all henchmen of power would be, and therefore they feel completely disempowered when the principle of equality is brought into consideration. Now, notice the very interesting thing. The moment equality in the eye of the law is brought into the equation, men feel completely disempowered, and the woman as victim begins to be empowered. Now, this is a very beautiful and significant pattern, and I wonder why this pattern has never been talked about. So, this is the second stage. So, from the stone, we have now proceeded to the written secular word. But that's not the end of the story. The story doesn't end there. After the men are gone, the third stage begins. Jesus starts a conversation with her. Till that time, Jesus did not utter a word to her. After everybody is gone, he opens a conversation. He says, has no one condemned you? She says, none. Then he utters those beautiful and life-affirming words. I also do not condemn you. Go, sin no more. Now here, we proceed to the third stage of the Word, with a capital W, which is the mind of God. So stone, secular word, spiritual word, the mind of God with a capital W. First word is small w. The second word is the spiritual word, Jesus Christ as a living word, the liberator, the liberator. To liberate is to give to people an opportunity to make a new beginning. Secular law, secular culture is unable, it doesn't have the resources to provide such an opportunity. It can at best protect people from being killed indiscriminately and unjustly, but it does not have the resource to empower a person to make a new beginning in her or his life. And that is the hallmark of the spiritual word. The spiritual word is nothing if not the empowerment to make a new beginning in life. And that's what is called transformation. It is keeping this in mind that Paul, when he writes to Corinthians, the second letter to Corinthians, chapter 5, verse 17 says, he who is in Christ Jesus is a new creation. The old has passed away, the new has come. So it is this that you find there. So it stands to reason to assume that the woman who has thus been saved from the jaws of death by Jesus, by his timely intervention, began a new life thereafter. The story, of course, does not go on to give further details, but all those things are left to our imagination. So it's very interesting, insightful, as well as beautiful to try and understand the significance of this event as encapsulating the spiritual evolution of humankind as a whole, starting from the crude stage of the Stone Age, proceeding to the more civilized stage of the written secular word, going to the ultimate stage of the spiritual liberating word, the Word of God, a simple event becoming, as it were, the summation of the total historical journey of humankind. So I leave my attempt to unpack the meaning of this very intriguing event at this point. I'm sure by now you're convinced that this is an event rich in its resonance, in its thematic nuances, and it would be extremely rewarding to continue to pursue its larger horizons of meaning, which will lead you to come to very significant insights into the logic of being human. Thank you. Wish you a very meaningful day ahead.